right, Michael, let's welcome the great Mark Greaney back to the show. Mark,
There he is.
welcome back.
How are
Time
you?
guys.
All right.
Thanks for having me back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, glad you're here, and congratulations on number 11, Gray Man, Sierra 6.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So Sierra 6 is the 11th Gray Man, but it's unique a bit to the series. So can you give our audience a quick overview of what they can expect this time out?
Sure. So Sierra 6, as you said, is different from anything else I've written in that it is two complete novels sort of interwoven into one, which you'll see when you read it. It is one of the timelines, one of those plot lines takes place 12 years ago when the hero of the Gray Man series, a guy named Court Gentry, is a young CIA paramilitary officer who is sent to Pakistan with his team on a mission to find a terrorist before he can deploy some radioactive dispersal devices or dirty bombs against coalition forces there. Also, in the present tense, it's 12 years later in the current day, and Court is working as a freelance intelligence asset, and he's actually working for the Indian government, or at least he thinks he is. And he is on a job in North Africa when he sort of comes across a ghost from his past, from this past mission from a dozen years ago that was very, personal to him. So this sends him on a kind of a quest that sends him into India to try to uncover what's going on, who this guy is, what really happened 12 years ago in this mission that he was just a part of. And he finds that he has an even bigger threat to diffuse this time. So it's two complete novels. It's a 165,000 word book. It's basically two 80,000 word novels interwoven that are very much interconnected. And it's also a very personal story for the hero. And it's got all the actions and twists and turns and two ticking clocks instead of one.
Right.
Absolutely. That does. Well, some out there might not know this, but Court Gentry first came into being in an earlier story you wrote but did not sell called The Goon Squad. In a way, Sierra 6 kind of closes that creative loop for you. When you realized the Gray Man was going to turn into a series, did you always have the intention to kind of return to Court's roots and tell this story?
Yeah, at first I did. And then you start thinking about how daunting it is to do an origin story of someone that you've talked a lot about. And I talked to my editor for years about an origin story, and my agent would be cool. But then I'm like, yeah, but people know how this thing happened and how that ended or whatever. And so finally I kind of got the idea about, well, what about just one point in time in his early CIA career that relates to something current, so people don't know how it ends. They don't know that that everything's going to be all right on the night. And once that got into my head, then I started kind of like figuring out how to make that work. And one of the key moments of Court's career in the CIA is when he left being just a non-official cover operations officer, and was folded into the CIA ground branch paramilitary unit. There's a character named Zach Hightower who's in most of the Gray Man books, who, this origin story, such as it is in Sierra 6, shows the two of them meeting and shows Court being integrated into this team when he's very much a singleton operative and doesn't play well with others. And so you see that whole dynamic there for the first time. And I thought it was something that longtime readers would enjoy because they knew some of the background, and first time readers would also really enjoy because it's kind of cool to see this CIA guy early in his career and then where he is now, where he's a lot more beaten down and world weary, but also has a lot more skill and a lot more just kind of perspective on things. So I wanted to show the same guy a dozen years apart after going through all the things he's gone through to show how he's changed.
Yeah.
That was actually one of my thoughts as I was reading it, that it would be, not only is it great for the people who have been reading, but it's a great entry book too. Like if you meet somebody who hasn't read any of the Gray Man books, this is a great place to start. And then you can kind of go back and
thank you.
And catch up. So
yeah, that was the idea. I mean, you always want every book to be able to stand on its own feet and stand alone. And then you also want to reward people for reading the other books, for them to be some sort of relationship, some sort of longer story arc. So that's always a balance with each book.
Well, given how many people probably have strong opinions of who Court was, that in that time period in their head, they hadn't read it until this book's now coming out. But was there a burden for you to get that early backstory, quote unquote, right or correct? Did you have any concerns or reactions that might come from, say, your audience's unspoken expectations matching what maybe their opinions that had formed over a dozen books?
Yeah, well, it is because you only have one chance to show Court and Zach meeting, and you only have one chance to show Court being trained in this unit, the Gulf Sierra unit that he goes to Pakistan with. And so, yeah, you definitely realize that every word is sort of going to be precious to people that have been along for this ride for the past 10, 12 years. And you want to live up to their expectations of that. Having said that, I had a good idea of what I wanted their dynamic to be, what I wanted Court's personality to be like when he's 25 years old and has been in the CIA for 5 years. And so, I felt like I should just do my thing, do what I thought was right, and then let the chips fall where they may, because I thought it was that aspect of the story was, I think it'll be like, candy for readers that have sort of wanted to know about Court and Zach's origins together.
Yeah, I know I did.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, that's actually a great segue into what I was going to ask next. So Sierra 6 is terrific, and it offers longtime fans a view into the history of a character we've come to know so well and the events that have been alluded to in this book or that. It was also extremely fun to see more Maurice, the Zach and Hanley, and what they were like at that point in their careers.
Yeah.
But did you, as their creator, learn any new details or insights about them or Court as you wrote this one, or all the backstory so fully formed in your head that you weren't surprised by anything, or did you kind of surprise yourself with some of the things that happened?
That's a great question, because that really did come into play, and it hit me sort of blindsided. Zach, the character Zach Hightower, who is the head of the paramilitary unit, Gulf Sierra, in the past, and everyone that's read Gray Man books know who Zach is and knows his past relationship with Court. He's a very kind of funny, sarcastic, just a super witty guy. He's a little bit comic relief, although he's also a pretty tough hombre.
Yeah.
And so as I started to write it, I was just kind of assuming that I knew Zach. Even though this was 12 years ago, I was thinking about how Court would be different now and then, but I wasn't really thinking about Zach being different. And the opening of this story is very, very violent, and it's very sort of catastrophic.
Right.
And Zach is the head of the team that suffers this kind of, opening scene rough patch. And immediately, once I had that scene down, I was like, I can't make Zach into the comic relief here, because he's, it's the height of the global war on terror. He's in the middle of, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and he has this team where he's had several losses recently. And so you see him shine, you see his personality shine throughout the book, and you do get some of the wisecracks here and there. But I think he comes across as a lot more serious guy, because he's, he has several lives that he's responsible for, and a mission that, could save or, cost thousands more lives. So he's very mission focused. He's very much, got his game face on for this. And I didn't want him to be the wisecracking, Ryan Reynolds type for this book.
Right.
And that sort of like, once I realized that, I was like, okay, that kind of informs, the other characters. Hanley's a little bit different here, a little bit more of a nuanced difference than he is in the present. Yeah. And Court definitely was a different guy when he was 25 years old than he is, present day.
I loved the story structure that you used here with the past and the present. I never felt like I was lost or I had to go back and say, wait, what did he say? And, so at first I was like, oh shit, Mark's really going on a limb here, but it works so beautifully for me as a longtime fan. I mean, I've always said that this is my favorite series. And the way you wrote it was not only was the craft exceptional, but it just made the story really easy to follow. So do you think this story pattern could be done again with the same effect that you've done? Or do you think this is kind of a one-trick pony with the way you wrote this book?
Well, I've already thought about doing it again in the future. The way this came to pass was, I remember I was telling Tom, my editor, Tom Colgan, the Tom Colgan, sure. Give him the definitive article, whatever. That's right. He's earned it. I remember telling him, like, I had this idea about, going back into his past, but I wanted to relate it to something in the present. So there was still a lot of mystery and blah, blah, blah. And I remember Tom saying to me, he's like, that sounds great, but you have to be careful, because you can't just like pull into the present, every 100 pages, right, or pull into the past every 100 pages. You sort of have to keep these two timelines together. And so I kind of just, thumbs up to that, and then started working on my story. And then I realized how right he was, because I would balance, not necessarily go from one chapter back and forth, but yeah. I mean, through the two plot lines, I think, are pretty much exactly the same length, and they bounce around and interweave. And it was super important for me that, something that happens 12 years ago in the past, you go into the next chapter and you're in the present, it's related to something that happened in the past. So that became kind of a science as it was going on. And just like every book I ever write, there's a period where I'm like, what have I done? What have I just committed myself to?
Where the hell am I going?
Where the hell am I going? And that always happens once it's too late to just throw it all and just start over. You're already sort of committed to the
100,000 words.
Yeah, exactly. Once you're into it, you're like, okay, I've got to make this work. But this, there's a bunch of things I didn't think about, and that's happened in other books too. Oh. And in this one, it was sort of like, okay, is the story in the present as impactful as it is powerful, or when people are reading the past and it goes into the chapter about the present, are they going to want to fast forward? I'm a reader first and foremost myself, and hopefully always will consider myself a reader before being a writer. And I know what I like. And, we've all read books where it's like, oh, we're going to go talk about this guy for a while. And you just start to skim a little bit, and it's just like, that would just be heartbreaking for me, if people did that. So it made me raise the stakes. Like each plot line made me raise the stakes in the other plot line. So in the end, it was a lot of fun, which is what I always say when I'm finished. But I don't say it for the 7 months or so I'm writing it. It's like at this stage, the book is done, and it's like, yeah, that was a great experience. But then when you look back on any one particular day, and I was, throwing the noose up in my closet. But I could see me doing it again, because there's other little fragments of things that have happened in the past that I've alluded to that I would like to show, but they would have to be related to something in the present, just because I don't want to just go back and show the scene where Court's CIA team turned on him, or show the scene where Court, was roped into the CIA. It would have to have some relevance to something else in the story. So it makes it tougher, but ultimately I think it makes for a better book.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Well, so just to clarify, so when you were writing, you wrote somewhat in the sequence that the book appears, or did you focus more on each story individually and then kind of cut and paste them together?
Well, I tried to do that, and it wasn't really working. Like I tried to be like, all right, I'm just going to do the 12 years ago in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then I'll do the present, and then I'll thread it all together. Right. And I remember one of the Tom Clancy novels I wrote, I can't remember, after Tom had passed, and I wrote the whole thing, and I can't remember which one it was offhand. I remember I sort of did that. I wrote basically multiple storylines, and then just like, okay, you'll just thread them in together at the end. And it kind of worked. I mean, it's obviously, it's kicking the can down the road. And it's like, this is a problem for tomorrow, where you've got to put them. But for this one, I was having trouble doing that. And so then I wrote this one pretty linearly. That's the first time I ever said that word right, and don't make me say it again. But
have a drink.
Yeah, but I wrote it in sequence, more or less, compared to other books. It's probably more.
Yeah.
Well, that's extraordinary for a couple of reasons. For one, the Court has two very distinct voices in this book, because he's two different people, and you never blurred that line. And as Mike and I were speaking before we got on air, and both stories were propelling me forward. And like when you would cut from one to the other, it wouldn't be disappointment, because I really wanted to know what the hell was happening in that story. And then I get to whatever stopping point. I'd be like, oh, good. But it was like this tension between really wanting to know what story B was happening, but being completely enveloped in story A. So I think you nailed it.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because literally that's the thing that I've spent pretty much all of 2021, freaking out about. Because as I said before, it's like you just don't want it to get where it's like, well, I'm really interested in what happened when he was in Pakistan and doing this thing, but the present time thing, it's like I could do without, or vice versa. So I just realized, as I was doing this, which is what Tom was kind of warning me from the beginning, is like you're writing two books that have to thread together.
Yeah,
because you can't just do like a little bit of the past and then have it relevant. So it was a learning. Every book has been a learning process. In my career, and this was no different.
Well, we learned a little bit reading it, but
yeah.
So Court's evolution as an operator has been, to a large extent, well ahead of his emotional evolution as a human, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I know this is by design, both by you as a writer and by Court as a guy who feels more effective in a job if he keeps everybody at arm's length for his emotional well-being and for their physical well-being. Sierra 6 offers a bit of background here. And of course, in later books, Zoya personifies this internal conflict for Court. But as a writer, which is more challenging, coming up with these compelling plots and terrific set pieces, or easing Court through this personal growth process that he's conditioned to fight every step of the way?
I probably spend more time thinking about the plot and the big, the big picture of the story. Mm-hmm. But I spend a good amount of time of going like, where do I want my characters, not just Court, but all the characters, where do I want them to end up at the end of this book? Like what growth or whatever has happened to them. And so I don't have this big future plan of this will happen to Court 3 books from now or whatever, or he'll, realize this or find love, and settle down or any of that sort of stuff. I don't have that. It's just, everything is just kind of dependent on the book. And then what I've done in the past with the hero or the characters. And so I do spend a lot of time, I wanted to show him as a 25-year-old man that pretty much knew nothing other than guns and tradecraft, because that was just basically how he'd been created. And he finds himself in real situations. I always say this to writers is like, the more you can have your reader identify with your character, even if your character is an assassin or if your character is like from outer space or whatever, the more you can come up with things to have them identify with it, I think the better you are. And so, in other Gray Man books, I've shown like CIA bureaucracy and kind of the hassle of that. And it was just sort of like, hey, I've worked in the corporate world. And, it's like people, a lot of people who are not CIA operatives will go like, yeah, I've dealt with bullshit like this before in my past.
And so, that guy's in my office too. Yeah,
that dude's in my office too. Exactly. And so, that's kind of been a thing that I think about when I'm writing. I'm like, people will identify with this. And so you see Court, he's 25 years old, but he's basically like a 16-year-old kid, as far as relationships, or I don't know what, it seems like now I have a 14-year-old who's basically starting to date. So, I was almost 18 before my first date. So either times have changed or I just really sucked back in the 80s.
Both.
No.
Maybe a little of both.
Little column B.
Well, so there's a 12-year gap between the one storyline and then the current storyline. So how much thought did you put into, I mean, technology is key to Court's success and is a part of your books. The newest and greatest technology out there from a military standpoint and technology in other areas as well. So you kind of have to watch yourself, I suppose, going back 12 years and saying, oh, he's got a tablet, well, no.
Yeah.
So how much did you spend, or were you just kind of like aware on the periphery that you got to kind of watch what you're handing him, in a holster 12 years ago versus what he's got today?
Right. Yeah. You see that his, the technology that he uses in the present day, even though it's coming from a freelance intelligence guy. I mean, Court thinks he's working for the Indians, and he sort of is, but he's also, he's working for a freelance Indian former intelligence officer. And the technology that this guy has at his fingertips is better than any technology you see 12 years ago when you have the full force of the U.S. coalition and the CIA and all this other stuff. Now, there was also some technology in there that I can't stand behind. It was just to make the pages keep turning. There's some satellite spoofing stuff that happens near the end of the book, and I'm like, yeah, I did a little research on that, and people talk about it some. And it's like, that's how it works, for the purpose of the book. As I've written more and more of these books, I've realized, it's not about being accurate; it's about being credible, which is an old Jean Le Carré line, or a paraphrase of a Jean Le Carré line. And so, it's like I needed the Americans not to be able to see via satellite what was on the ground, or via Predator, what was on the ground over the Pakistan border at this point in the story. So it is irrelevant to me whether there is actually the technology to close their eyes like that. It's like I'm really hot and heavy into the turning the pages and getting this plot going. So it's like I'm going to make it work the way it's going to work. To serve the story that I want to tell. So technology is important up to a point. And I was a little more slavish to it earlier in my career, because you get emails from people that's like, well, the microchip, blah, 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 and so you find yourself kind of writing to shut those guys up and instead of like serving the story. And so now I'm like, hey, just come at me with your heat about how, like the Russians would not have had this satellite spoofing technology, like give me that all day long, and I'll just delete your emails and write the story that I think is really, really cool and fun to read. So
I'll go to your book.
That's my philosophy now. Yeah.
Right.
Part of me wants to meet those people and see what they're like, and part of me doesn't want any part of that. I've been at it long enough, and then honestly, as well as my books are doing now, I feel like I kind of heard more of that kind of pedantic stuff when I worked in the Tom Clancy milieu. And oh my gosh, the Tom Clancy readers were amazing, and I would do these tours. And there'd be all these people when I put out a Clancy book, and all these people would come, and I was like, I get so many evil emails from people that just hate me, and they're going to show up here in Dallas, or they're going to show up here in Phoenix, or whatever. And I remember I was in Houston, and I was like looking out at this full room, and I was going, all right, who's the guy that's emailing me about this particular thing that happened with parachutes or whatever. And I would like pick the guy out of the crowd, and then afterwards, this is God's honest truth has happened. And I saw this guy, and I was like, there he is, right there. I know what that guy's all about. And then he came through the signing line and came up to me, and I'm like, here we go. And he's like, I just want to thank you for carrying on these characters. These characters have meant so much to me since the 80s, and I hate that Tom's not around anymore, but I really appreciate you carrying these characters on. And so, not only did I feel like a big asshole, it also helped me like say, gosh, it's the decision whether you're going to write somebody else's characters. It's like there's a lot of people that want to read that stuff, and a lot of people that celebrate the fact that these characters who are just legacy characters are able to read them dealing with contemporary situations. So, if the book is good, the book is good. That's the way I kind of look at it. Well, there's a wonderful character in Sierra 6 named Julie Marquez. As someone who's worked with children on the autism spectrum and has autistic godchildren and a lot of autistic people in my life, I think she was beautifully and accurately rendered.
Thank you.
Sure. Coincidentally, I just rewatched The Accountant, which if people at home know, that's about an assassin who is autistic. And as I thought about, I just like finished your book, and then The Accountant was on, and kind of coincidentally watched them back to back. And as I thought about Court a bit, you could interpret some of his behaviors as being slightly on the spectrum at times. But what I was curious about is what inspired this aspect of the story, and how did you go about getting all those details right?
I did a bunch of research, but your first part of your question, what inspired that part of the story? I wanted Court in a relationship or sort of navigating the early stages of a relationship. And as I've spent a lot of time doing research with members of the military and intelligence people, and not so much in intelligence, but in the military, people are so young. Some of these people are so young. And as I get older, gosh, it seems like they get younger. I don't know what that's about, but you know, I've met, you know, 20-year-old females that are, you know, had more responsibility on a daily basis than I've ever had in my entire life, you know, like landing a helicopter on the back of a destroyer or something like that is a specific example. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of intelligence people in the Army. A lot of them are female. It's kind of like you sort of get annoyed when females don't get their due. And that's not some woke, like, you know, like check me out thing. I mean, it's just really like, I'll go to a military base and it's not 50% female, but it's maybe 30% female, and they're doing amazing jobs. And so I kind of had this idea for this young female intelligence analyst who's very, very good at her job. And just somewhere along the line, I remember calling up Tom and actually calling up Scott, my agent, and asking both of them, do you think it'd be okay if I put someone who has some Asperger's in the book, or is that going to be like looked at as, you know, I don't know, you know, the wrong way? Yeah, right. And I did some research, and there are people in my world that you know, have this, and you know, you see in the book, it's not a negative to her at all. No, and it's really not. It's certainly not a negative to the CIA, because, you know, the traits, you know, I think she mentions early on when she's explaining her situation to court, she's just like, you know, we're honest. We're, you know, like we have all these like positive traits too. And I don't know. As I started to build her as a character, I just fell in love with her. And I just, you know, hopefully that comes across on the page. Like, you know, she was just a super cool young woman that I thought would be exactly what court would need, and also would be just impenetrably confusing to court, you know, because of the way that I've created the character. And I thought that would just be a fun aspect of tension.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, Sean and I and a whole slew of other people kind of follow you and some of your journeys on social media and whatnot with your family and things like that. And I just can't imagine how much busier you can be as one man. I mean, you got Sierra 6, Armored audio book, Gray Man movie with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. I know you and Rip are working on some Red Metal follow-up. I mean, and God knows what else you're working on that we don't even know yet. All that in a bustling family life has to have changed the way you structure your days. Any dramatic shifts in your schedule to accommodate all this amazing output that you're doing now?
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I am writing the exact same amount I wrote when I was a bachelor with no dog, not even a dog. And now I'm married with 3 stepkids and 4 dogs, and you know, like a house. I mean, I have restructured in that my younger brother Trey is my manager now, and you know, I trust him implicitly, and he's smarter than me in every way, shape, or form, and he kind of keeps me on track. And his wife, my sister-in-law, is you know, like does a lot of sort of like the office management stuff of the life. Because I remember when I brought Trey and Kristen on a couple of years ago, I was like, you think you're going to come in here and take stuff off my hands and that's going to make my life more efficient? You're going to come in here and see all the crap that I'm not doing at all that I should be. And it's like, I'm sort of running a multi-million-dollar business out of a backpack at Starbucks, you know, and that sounds cool until you realize how poorly I'm doing. You know, it's like, I'm writing the books. Everything else is just falling to pieces. And so he had to sort of, Trey and Kristen had to sort of come in and get me organized. So that aspect is definitely improved quite a bit. But I still have to write the exact same number of words in 2022 as I did in 2012 or 2013. And like I was married previously, but we didn't have kids, and we had one dog and then sort of 2 at the end. So I guess that was a little bit, you know, eased into it. But, you know, my wife and stepkids are all super, super supportive. The dogs are not. The dogs don't give a shit. The dogs
tearing up your transcripts.
The dogs are 50 feet away right now, annoyed that I'm not spending time with them. But yeah, so there's more publicity to do. There's more just sort of decisions to make that are not writing decisions. And then you throw COVID in there, and it limits your, like location research and your travel and stuff like that. And it's made things a lot tougher. And I do get a little bit panic attacky sometimes. I talk to my wife about it, and I'm fine a couple of minutes later, but it's like, I'll look at my calendar for tomorrow 16 times. I'm like, oh, is that interview at 1 o'clock got moved to 3? It's on the itinerary. Did I move it on the calendar? It's like that happens all day, every day. And then there's, obviously responsibilities with the kids and other aspects of life going on. So things definitely have gotten a lot more complicated. I will say though, I love writing, and I guess I forgot that for a little while. I always liked the book when it was done. Yeah. But getting kind of locked into your story, and you realize, you guys know this. It's like the most beautiful thing that happens to you in your day.
It's adrenaline.
It is like you have 3 hours, and you look up at the clock, and you go, "Oh my gosh, I've been working for this solid," and then the inverse happens as well, where you're just sort of staring at the clock as it ticks very slowly and you're not producing anything. So both those things happen, but that high, that adrenaline of really just, like pounding it out. And I recently just finished this book called Armored, which is a novel. It's essentially the same story of the audiobook I just put out, but it's much expanded with a lot of different parts and characters and other stuff going on. Right. And I worked on that all fall and into the winter. And I just went out of town, spent 10 days or so in Chicago, and just wrote all day long. I mean, I was in the lobby at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd write till noon and then work out, or walk around Chicago and eat good food. And then by 4 or 5 o'clock, I was back in the room and working till 10 or 11 o'clock. And I just cranked out a ton of words. And then it just sort of, at that time, it just said, oh yeah, I like to do this. This thing I do for a living. Don't forget that you enjoy it, when it's working right. Yeah. So, I mean, even though things are a lot more complicated now, these are, every writer would love to have the problems that I have, so I'm definitely not going to whine about it.
Sure.
Well, Mark, the verisimilitude of your novels is striking. As I read this, your ability to write about this. I'm
gonna look that word up real quick. Now I know verisimilitude.
Hey, by the way, that might be the first time. That might be the first time I pronounced it right.
Never heard of it before.
Yeah, you did good.
But your ability to write this world and all the intricacies of intelligence operations, the seamlessness of the scenes between the bureaucratic side, the operational side. You'd think you actually worked intelligence. And again, I have no idea how much of this stuff is accurate and how much it isn't. But like you said, it's all about credibility. It reads like it's real. So after 11 novels in this world, does that aspect of the story writing come easy to you, or is it still tedious to script those sequences where you're dealing with, the background of an operation and then the foreground of an operation?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, Sean, I love finding tension in other parts of the story. I mean, it's cool to write a scene where a guy's hanging off a piece of bamboo and shooting a guy, and like a missile's going up his butt or whatever is happening. That does not happen.
That's in the next book.
Yeah, we can edit that out. That's in the next book. Like,
spoiler.
Let me write that down.
Spoiler alert.
But I mean, the action sequences and stuff, it's like those are cool to write, and they're cool to like go back and edit and go like, oh yeah, I think people will like that. But my favorite thing is just to enjoy the tension and dialogue. And if it's two people on the 7th floor at CIA in a conference room eyeing each other across the table suspiciously, I love that dynamic, and I love the tension, that you can create from everything that doesn't have to do with combat, that doesn't have to do with, this guy's a terrorist, this guy's your hero, the obvious tension there. I mean, there's also tension with, people with different career goals, people with, different, fiefdoms in the intelligence agency. So I like that a lot. I want to get better at it, understand it better. I mean, there's a few like former CIA guys who write great stuff like that. Jason Matthews, the late Jason Matthews, sadly passed away. His stuff was fantastic. I don't know if either of you read the David McCluskey book.
Not yet. It's on my
Oh my God. Yeah. Damascus Station.
Yeah, I've heard great things about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great story all around, but it also just nails all these details. And I'm not former intelligence at all. I'm just, a researcher and, talk to people and make stuff up. Yeah. Those are the three things that I do pretty well. And, but you read these, the authenticity from these guys and I just eat it up with a spoon. I just really, really like that stuff. So I like that aspect of it. I don't find it tedious at all. I just want to execute it even better in the future.
I didn't ask that question very, very, very well because I don't find those scenes tedious at all either.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't take it that way.
What struck me is that it seems like you write, and again, this is what your goal is as a writer. And I know it's not easy. I know no sentence is easy, but it seems you have such an ease in that world honestly, I would believe you had a career in operations if I knew nothing about you, because you just seem so comfortable writing in that world and writing the operational side and the planning side. I didn't know if that was very hard for you or if you're so comfortable with these characters that that's not as hard for you as it looks.
Well, thanks for saying that. I mean, I think what it is like I go into a scene and I know who the characters are in the scene. So there's a scene in Sierra 6 where you see some people that you haven't seen since the first Gray Man book. A character named Maurice, who's the guy that trained up Gentry when he was in this singleton, this autonomous operations little program. And you see Matt Hanley, who at the time, this is 12 years in the past, is an up and coming, CIA operations guy who's running a group in Ground Branch. And you see Denny Carmichael, who makes appearances throughout the series and in the Gray Man film that's coming out in July, incidentally. And you see these different characters that I've danced around for years and years, and you throw them all in a room together and have them argue about whether Gentry should be pulled out of his current assignment and folded into a paramilitary unit. And then you keep some of the information about Gentry, who he is and his history, and they're using him by his code, they're referring to him by his code name. And so that heightens the tension a little bit. And it's a lot of fun to build those scenes. And, I'll do more of that for sure.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, Marcus, I know that's not your name, but I'm going to call you that anyway. It's
fun.
You've reached the end of the regular portion of the interview once again.
Okay. Somehow survived that.
A 4-time survivor.
4-time survivor. No, it's not over yet. This could still go south any minute.
Any second now.
Is he our most appeared guest now because of the anniversary show? I think he is.
Maybe.
We'll send you your award in the mail.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know.
Crayon or marker. Yeah.
But no, so now we were to the lightning round, and it could be absurd or it just could be us cajoling you into something that you're not willing to do. But the first one is my first question is kind of easy. You've done extensive research, whether it's traveling to numerous countries, shooting all manner of weapons, picking the brains of any number of people. Of all the research you've done, what was the most uncomfortable or out of your element you've been thus far?
I mean, last September, I flew in the back seat of an F-18, and an author, Jack Stewart, is he's a pilot for Southwest. He's also a Navy in the Naval Reserve and an F-18 pilot. And so I went through the little program to the survival program and to learn about all this sort of stuff up in Maryland. And then I went down to New Orleans to do the flight. And I was less terrified than I thought I would be. But 10 years ago, I was afraid to fly on a commercial jet.
Oh my God!
Really? Or maybe even less than 10 years ago. Like when I first started writing and traveling quite a bit, it was very, very stressful. I mean, to the point where I would medicate myself before a plane ride.
Wow!
And I've done it so many times that it got less and less scary. It's like it's not like you get braver. It's more like, yeah, I just can't get my body worked up that much.
Yeah,
right.
Numb by exposure.
I was on 100 numb by exposure. That's great. Yeah, I've been on 100 planes this year. I just can't. I would have a heart attack and die if I got that freaked out every time. So I'd gotten away with a lot of it, but an F-18 where you're pulling multiple G's and, you're strapped in and, just the whole concept of the ejection seat. I mean, there's a thing right between your knees that if you pull on it, you're suddenly, 30,000 feet in the air by yourself.
Don't do it at Mach 1.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm not pulling that thing no matter what happens. If we're going into the mouth of like a giant monster, I'm not pulling that ejection thing. So
at any point did you say, talk to me, Goose? Did you
I didn't.
Hello, boys.
I think singing Danger Zone or any of that is frowned upon in the Navy. I don't think I've actually directly asked them that, but I'm just going to go out on a limb. It was actually the best experience of anything I've done, but it was probably the most out of my element. Like, I've learned to scuba dive, I've done stunt driving classes, I've done all sorts of firearms courses that involve live fire and bullets, going 1.5 foot, by your head on both sides. And so those are obviously, to get your adrenaline going. But there was, this flight, we went Mach 1 and we pulled 6 Gs and, we did a bunch of things. And we flew in formation with 3 other aircraft. And it was a spectacular moment. It was one of those moments while it was happening, you're going like, oh, you're going to want to do this tomorrow and you can't. This is your one shot to do this. And it's great. Although I do say it was like an 1.5-hour flight. Now, there was about 10 minutes where I did not want to be on that airplane because I was getting a little queasy. But
it was an hour and a half. That's a damn long flight.
Yeah,
it was it seemed like it. I mean, it went by really fast, but at the same time, I'm like, gosh, we did a whole bunch of neat stuff, in that time. It was an amazing experience, and the people in the Naval Reserve are just top notch. It was really
nice.
Great. That's phenomenal.
So much for a lightning round. That was like a
that was
answer,
No, this is great. This is great. No, that lightning, it doesn't have to be fast. It just means it strikes you when you least expect it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I just thought. So outside of authors you admire, who is the single most interesting person you've spoken with, and why?
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Or and extremely important. I should say outside the authors and your wife.
Yeah. Let's put that caveat. I mean, this is going to sound like such a pat answer, but I have to say my father. My dad ran the local NBC affiliate here in Memphis, and everything that I am is like, to this day. He passed away in 2005 before I'd even finished a book. So he never saw any of this, but he was always encouraged my reading. He always encouraged my writing. And he was just an amazing guy. He was a World War II vet, 21 years old. He fought in Germany and was actually in the Philippines when the war ended, when the bombs the nuclear bombs were dropped. So he was actually officially in both theaters, because even though the bombs were dropped and the war ended, there was a lot of sort of cleaning up. There was a lot of Japanese that didn't know the war was over in the Philippines, and he had to go inform them with his Tennessee knowledge of Japanese, I guess. And some of them probably were not good listeners. But my dad was just, not to speak ill of my mom was fantastic, but there's just something about my dad where I sort of see myself in my actions now, even like now that I have stepkids, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, you sound so much like your dad. I like my dad. So yeah. Probably so. I mean, that sounds like an easy answer, but I mean,
that's a
truly
answer, my friend.
It's truly how I feel. Like if I think about it sometimes, like if I could have my dad back for like 10 minutes, what I would give up for that, just to tell him like everything that's happened and, like all that stuff. Cause he would just be getting a kick out of everything.
See, my mom's dad would be my answer. So that's not Pat at all.
All right, good.
Okay. My last question, that feeling and for everybody it's different, but you left home and you're like, I left the TV on, I left the oven on, I left the iron on, whatever it is, that feeling where you forgot something. So have you ever turned a book in and suddenly remembered that you forgot to name a character after somebody? Has that ever happened to you?
So I feel like this is a leading question. Was there supposed to be a Sean
callback? Is it callback to 2 lightning rounds ago?
Here's what I'm gonna do. Wait, was it you, Sean, or was it Mike?
No, Sean.
All right. I can put you in armored because I'm still doing one last round of proofread on armored. I've never had that feeling.
I'm putting that on my tombstone if it happens.
I've never had the feeling that I've forgotten to do that, but I have been informed while on a Zoom call that I've forgotten to do it and shamed a little bit.
They need a KIA list. It's all right.
You're going to be the biggest jackass in armored. He has a different name now, but it's fine. No, I will get you in a book. Sean Cameron is. I need to do another IRA themed book, and I'll throw you.
You had a really good reason for. You told me in 1 minute out. You go, did you want to be a human trafficker from like from the Baltic states? And I'm like, okay, good. I'll wait.
Yeah, you're like, I'll hold out for a better role. Yeah.
Ex-cop molester. Great. Yeah.
My next, the Gray Man book I'm just starting working on now that comes out next year. There's absolutely a lot of roles for great Anglo-Saxon names like Sean Cameron. So, and if I don't
Scottish
forget,
Polacks, I'm a Scottish Polak.
If I don't forget,
I just want page 137.
You have my phone number, so you'll just let me know.
I'll just keep once a week. Hey, don't forget. Yeah,
exactly.
You might want to change your cell phone number there, Mark.
Yeah, exactly. Note to self.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, we know you were in Chicago, and I think you guys were recently in New York as well, right? You and the family. So let's get to the point here. Who has the best pizza?
So I have a dairy allergy, so I threw a curveball your way, didn't I?
Damn it.
But as I reflect back before I had the dairy allergy, I get a sinus thing with my dairies. It's not anything weird, but
weird.
I just get like a histamine reaction from dairy. But I really brought this lightning round to a
You know, we're at the age where we start talking about body parts and what's going wrong.
I feel like I've been there for a while, but I like New York. I like New York pizza more. I like Chicago is like one of my favorite places in the world. But when I go to Chicago, I have great steak or whatever, and I will have New York pizza is something I still dream about being off dairy. There's some actually pretty good dairy options, which sounds disgusting unless you absolutely can't eat dairy without getting sick, and then they're much more palatable. And that's where I am.
Yeah,
me too.
Just lost
John's on Bleecker Street. By the way, John's on Bleecker Street in New York is in the Village. Is the best pizza.
Okay.
All right.
John's. Okay, don't know that.
Landed a strong punch there. All right. Okay. A younger Mark Greaney is sitting in his office chair at his corporate job, thinking about writing books, nervous and excited about the prospect. 12 years forward and millions of books sold. What one sentence would you like to write down to send back to your former self? What would you say?
Gosh. I mean, this is another thing that sounds like a pat answer, but if I could talk to myself and if I was able to get through to myself, I would say, relax and believe in yourself. And that doesn't mean, everybody should believe in their self about everything they want to do.
Yeah.
It's like, I would love to be a forward on Barcelona's soccer team, and believing in myself is just going to, send me off in the wrong direction and waste a lot of time because no one's going to believe in me and I'm not getting that shot.
Yeah.
But, if you put the hard work in and, I say relax because I think of myself in my 30s and I was so freaked out about not being where I wanted to be in life and not having accomplished things or whatever, that I think that you spend a lot of time just sort of spinning your gears and not being productive because you're freaking out that you're not being productive. And it's just this cycle. And if I could just go back to myself when I was 30 years old and slap myself in the face and say, if you work hard and you don't freak out, you spend your time, doing something, like working on the craft, then you can actually get somewhere.
Right.
But I honestly think I did not believe that I would ever be published. I just really like to write. And, I would sort of dream about being published. And I would do the thing where you sign your name on a sheet of paper over and over, like you're signing books. And now I sign 1 million books. I'm like, yeah, be careful what you wish for. But that's a great thing. But I don't think, if when I was 24 years old, you told me that if I worked my butt off for a few years, I'd become a published author, was my goal, I would have worked my butt off. But instead, it's like, I'm piddling at this thing because nothing's ever going to happen out of it. So that's what I would tell myself, is just to relax and not freak out, because then you just burn energy and you don't create anything. And just to believe in this thing that's so important to you. And like I said, there's a lot of other things that I've liked and wanted in my life. I wanted to be the drummer in a big rock band or whatever. That didn't happen. I'm 54 years old. If I was 54 and still believing in that, it probably still wouldn't have happened. And, I guess I always just sort of bristle when people say, like, always go after it, never quit, always do this, always do that. It's like, well, I don't know. I've quit
stuff. Reasonable about the expectations here.
Right. It's like, I've quit stuff that it was probably right for me to quit, even though I wanted it just as much as I wanted to be a writer. Yeah. If you could say you can be a writer, or you can be, on the U.S. national team as a striker, I would probably say U.S. national team as a striker. Of course, your career's over by 33, so it's probably a good thing I didn't say that, because I'm 54. But but I mean, I'm glad I didn't overly believe in myself in that. So it's all a balance, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I would say to myself, I'd say, I know it sounds crazy as shit, but buy Bitcoin when it comes out. That's what I would say.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm old enough to where I say Apple and then Bitcoin.
Company named Amazon.
Same.
Yeah.
We all are.
All right. Number 3, let's say the virtual reality has finally hit the level of, say, Star Trek's holodeck, and you get to choose just one mission Court Gentry has conducted in all of the Gray Man series to experience their full effect. Which book and which mission is it?
I'm so partial to the 4th Gray Man book, Deadeye, which isn't the biggest seller and probably not the best book or whatever, but my research trip for that was so just impactful. I just went by myself with a backpack to Estonia and to Stockholm and to Copenhagen and to Hamburg and to Brussels. All places that were in the book. And I just, for a couple of weeks, I just sort of like, shot from place to place. And then that book turned out the way I wanted it to turn out. And the scenes in the book and the blizzard and escaping from
across the roof.
Yeah, when they're going across the roof and stuff like that. It's like, if you ask me, like, sort of like, what's the quintessential Gray Man moment, it might be that. I mean, I should definitely say something out of the new book, but the new book, I've had less time to, like, ruminate over it. The impact of it is still sort of a little bit fresh. But I mean, Deadeye probably not Ballistic, where a guy gets his face sewed onto a soccer ball. I probably wouldn't want to relive that in virtual reality. But it actually happened down in the Cartel Wars, so I didn't make that. But it also happened in my book.
Yeah, nice.
Well, man, you've survived. I think you were bruised a little bit. You bruised and battered a little bit.
I was back. Yeah.
Put some ice on that now. Yeah.
Put some ice on. But Mark, Sierra 6 is honestly, I'm sure every writer aspires for the next book to be the best book. And I have my favorite sequences in all these books, but it's as good as anything you've ever written.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It's phenomenal. I can't wait for people to read it, because I know the longtime Court Gentry fans will love the backstory, and the new people will be like, holy shit, I need to read more about this guy, because this is a badass origin story.
Yeah, no kidding.
Really glad you did this book.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
All right.
Congrats. Best of luck. And
thank you.
We're going to be pushing the hell out of it.
You bet.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. It's always fun to be on here, and hope you'll have me back next time.
We'll see.
I slowed that lightning round down so much, it's just glacial.
No. Again, lightning round has nothing to do with speed. It's all about
All right. Now you tell me.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Everybody, buy this damn book.
Absolutely.
Make it a bestseller.
Cheers.
Michael, you and I are on record of saying we're huge Gray Man fans. It's our favorite series.
Yep.
And this book lives up to the billing. Sierra 6 is outstanding with its dual timeline. We get to see the origin of Court and his into the Sierra teams.
Right.
And then we get to see a great present day story as well.
Right.
And as usual, it's a huge pleasure and honor to have Mark Greaney on the show. I love what we do. This is so much fun. And everybody needs to join us every Monday for just another terrific video.
Right. And he's right about that book, folks. This could be a New York Times #1 bestseller. We're saying it now. It has everything to do. So let's make it happen, people. Pre-order that thing.
Absolutely. We'll see you next Monday.
Here we go.
My glass is empty. And it gets to show us glimpses of Court.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna start over
because we got my book on the brain.
Cole Hoffner. Cool.
Whee! All right, let's go back to actual bestseller. Here we go. In 3, 2, and meow.